Hello and welcome to Series 3, Episode 2 of The John McNair Show. Today I am speaking with Andrieh Vitimus, a very experienced magician, Reiki master and author. In addition, he holds the highest initiatory rank in Haitian Voodoo. His new book, Hands on Chaos Magic, Reality Manipulation Through the Ovaki Current, is destined to become a classic in the field of practical magic. I'm sure you will enjoy this interview and would urge anyone even slightly interested in esoterica to buy Hands on Chaos Magic. Chaos magic assumes that there might not be an ultimate truth. Do you believe in the existence of an ultimate truth?
Well, the chaos magic assumes there may not be an ultimate truth. So to say that there isn't an ultimate truth is an ultimate truth.
Okay.
So much more likely that I have to exist in a kind of paradox that there may be an ultimate truth, there might not be an ultimate truth, and I don't know. And I'm okay with either answer, depending on which belief that I'm in at that point in time. A lot of chaos magicians will say they don't believe in the ultimate truth. What I'm saying is more that I don't know, because there may or may not be an ultimate truth, and to assume that there isn't an ultimate truth is to actually assume an ultimate truth if you do logical analysis. In practice, that actually means a couple of things. It means mostly I don't have to be right. I only have to do things that work.
Right. So it doesn't affect your practice at all?
No, because one, I'm in a paradigm, and I'm putting my belief behind it. I'm 100% in that paradigm. I'm putting my belief behind it. I'm forcing myself into that worldview. So if I'm in a paradigm that this is the way things are, then yeah, for me at that time, that's the way things are. I go on a ritual and do a ritual with certain spirits. I have to believe that they exist at that point in time. Otherwise, what's the point of doing the ritual?
Yeah, there's no point.
But that doesn't mean that 3 weeks later, I might exactly believe that I contacted spirits or that they're completely existent, independent of me. But when I'm in the ritual, they're real. The truth at that moment is absolute, that they are real. Because otherwise it would be mostly irrelevant to do any kind of magical operation if you couldn't at least convince yourself during the act that it was happening. That's probably why most magical operations fail, actually.
What, because the practitioner doesn't really believe in what they're doing?
Right, they don't believe in what they're doing. They have negative self-talk. They have negative conditioning about the fact that maybe they don't deserve what they're asking for. All of those issues that come into play, that at that moment they aren't in believing that what they're asking for is positive or it's possible. They're completely conflicted about that. And if you're conflicted about that, well, nothing happens.
No, because your energy is divided.
Your energy is divided. If you want to take a purely psychological model, you haven't really got past your conscious mind to push that into your subconscious mind. From an energy model, it's divided. If you're trying to, from a spirit model, you haven't really made contact with the spirit because you have too many doubts, or you're transmitting that doubt to the spirit as well.
Well, you've answered that question very fully.
There you go. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to congratulate you on writing such a superb book. I actually haven't completely finished it yet, but this is a book I wish I had about 35 years ago because everything is in the one spot. You don't need to go from this book to that book. Everything's basically in that one book if you have the eyes to read it, so to speak, because there's a lot of traditional magic. There's a lot of chaos magic. There's a wealth of information, and I can see it taking about 3 years to really work through that book.
Well, that was the time. Yeah, that was actually the time when people asked me, and I said, "How long did you intend for people to work through this book?" And I actually said 3 to 4 years, 2 years if you really had a lot of time. And when I wrote in the prologue of the book that this was really the book I wish I would have had when I started magic. It really is. It is what I gleaned was the most useful techniques and the most reality manipulating in a very practical sense. Here's how to do this. Not that I think I'm right, of course, but here's what I've seen work the best out of the variants of this technique. Now go basically take the book and go explore some more now that you have actually got stuff that is more foundational.
It's good because it gives you the foundations and also gives you the leeway to experiment yourself. And that's quite important. It doesn't preach at you as such. It's an inclusive sort of work. It includes the experience of the reader.
I really hope that, I know and we live in a very competitive society, especially here in the States. And my hope wasn't really to displace other religions, but just give people foundational materials so they could get the other techniques to work, whether it be a Wiccan, whether it be a ceremonial magician. It doesn't matter. What was mostly missing in a lot of those books is the kinds of things you have to actually do to get those traditions to work. The methods they give could work. It's just kind of like they missed a few steps on how to actually get them to work in practical magic. And some of the training that you have to go through to get those systems to work. Because it's not really popular to say you have to do some work. I was hoping that in a lot of ways, my book was like the missing manual for people so they could pick it up. If they were already working with a tradition, they could apply some of the things in my book and actually get that tradition to work effectively.
I see a lot of traditional magic in there, but restated in a modern way.
Well, thank you.
Don't you think? Like the triangle of art, the approach to the triangle of art, it's all traditional teaching, but restated in a sort of friendly way, so to speak.
Yeah, and I mean that's if you actually go through towards that period. I started off with a triangle, and then did kind of a comparison to say that it doesn't necessarily have to be a triangle, because in Western magic it is definitely a triangle of art, but in hoodoo it's sometimes a circle. And I've seen chaos magicians draw out tesseracts to do evocations into. And then I give an example in the book where I use a bottle to trap something, which is a type of modern interpretation, more of a sorcerer interpretation of a triangle. Because the concept's the same. It's a containment field of some sort, or a focus point, depending if the spirit is nice or not so nice.
A bottle, I haven't heard of that one before, but why not? It's a three-dimensional representation of a container, so yes, why not?
Bottles are used in voodoo all the time to trap things.
Are they?
In voodoo and African religions, all the time they use bottles of some sort are used to trap angry spirits or draw them, or jars used to draw spirits into, so that way you can work with them. And you see that reflected too in the Goetia, where if a spirit's being not so nice, you conjure them into a brass vessel. You throw them in the brass vessel so they can't get out. But there's a lot of traditions outside of Western that actually uses bottles a lot, or some kind of physical containers to put spirits into. And then you can work with the spirits that are in the bottle. Kind of like the genie in the bottle.
Yes. Yeah. It's a bit foreign for me because I don't have much contact with voodoo, although a friend of mine is a musician and he's always been into voodoo. His name is Steve Tallis and he's living in Paris and France, and all his music's to do with voodoo and all sorts of stuff. So I know he's heavily into that, but it's very, very interesting as an outsider looking in. I get a feel for what he's into and what you're into, and it's quite an exciting and very different worldview.
Yeah, it definitely is. And when you start to look at similarities between these different worldviews, and you see like how the bottle or a circle in this tradition is that similar thing to a triangle, and you start to see how maybe some chaos magicians can use a tesseract to do, which is a hypercube, to do evocations into. You kind of realize what I was getting at isn't that it isn't necessarily so important what you're using as long as you believe that it will work.
Okay, that makes sense.
But usually, getting that belief that it will work takes time and practice, because you have to build up to the point that you know your technique is effective. And that usually means you have to get results and verify. Otherwise, you won't have the strength of belief behind whatever you're doing.
Yes. Well, that's dead right. Yeah, it won't work otherwise. Let's look at the third question, Andrieh. If there is such a thing as spiritual development, does the mystical experience play a role in that?
See, the question is hard because it depends on what you call mystical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of people who are much more mystical than I am. They'll search out the truths of the universe, and they may or may not be right. But those same people are not the ones playing the game, as it were. Like, they're not trying to be successful in the world that they live in. They've withdrawn from the world, escaped from it.
Yes, I know.
I do not necessarily find that to be a good thing, because we have life. We're here. We have life. We should be in the game, as it were, of life. That said, of course, like certain experiences, mystical experiences, trance states, astral experiences, all these things can have a profound impact on the individual. And they can make quantum leaps from those type of experiences in their practical magic. In fact, you could have dreams that give you information, even spiritual techniques, or actual information on lottery numbers, stuff like that, although that's a little rare, or future events. You can certainly have mystical experiences which shake you to your bones and change you who you are, which means if you've changed who you are, the world has changed around you because you don't see it the same way anymore. What that means is once you've changed, you can change the world. So absolutely, those type of mystical experiences can have a big impact on spiritual development, because any change to yourself changes the world around you.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. I was looking at the fact that mystical experience can change a person profoundly.
Yeah, they most certainly, mystical experiences can. I guess the best way I've seen it is like when you go to the mountain of a mystical experience, you have those extreme experiences of a mystical nature. A lot of people, some people, not everyone, but some people have those experiences and they think that's the end of it. But a true mystical experience changes you. You cannot do the same things you did before it. In fact, you are different enough that you have to take a different set of actions. There's different choices that you can now make because you're so different. For me, an instance of that type of mystical experience, so when I first got into magic, I had a rough time and I had what would be considered everything was falling apart until I had one experience which forced me to accept the possibility that maybe there was magic. That is a kind of mystical experience. It changed my impact. And in fact, in a lot of the Eastern traditions, when they talk about mystical experiences, they do years and years and years of meditation and practice to have one mystical experience which changes their whole outlook. And then they're forced to, with the change in outlook, act a different way in the physical world. So mystical experience that is not acted upon is not really a mystical experience. It hasn't changed you. It's kind of like wishful thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the sign is that it changes you by shaking you to your core, like you said. I think that's the proof. And you're never the same again.
Right. And you could say that about almost any experience, that you wouldn't be the same again after you have the experience. But mystical experiences, especially in a practical sense, especially if you're seeking out practical mystical experiences, such as initiations, they should change you. You should be a different person. Maybe it's a subtle realization that you had, just a small one, but it's still a realization that changes you and moves you past wherever you're at.
Yeah. I want you to move on to Reiki. You are a Reiki master, and you'd be able to answer this question quite well, I think. And it's, do you find the Reiki energy softens or homogenizes the magical energies you work with in a positive way?
I definitely think Reiki has been positive, but I think the party line on Reiki, as it were, have been involved in much more different energy modalities and in different magical currents. There's a lot of assumptions in Reiki that may not hold, but they're good assumptions to have anyway, to believe when you're going in. But when you get more and more advanced, it seems like the lock or safety mechanisms gets turned off, and you can see you're connecting to a universal energy source. In traditional Usui Reiki, this is filtered through the Usui symbols, the core Reiki symbols. There's many different forms of Reiki, though. When you start realizing you're connecting to an ultimate source of energy, there's a natural assumption that says that's always good. But the universe has to go both ways. Usui specifically gave you symbols that vibrate in a certain manner each way, kind of trying to help us, like, be able to do healing rituals. Now, I've always found that being a Reiki master gives me far more energy. It taught me how to tap into energy sources that were outside of myself. Because once I could understand how I was tapping into the Reiki not from the party line, from really examining what I thought was going on when I was pulling Reiki down, it's easy to apply that to other things and tap into other sources. That said, the Reiki, when you're doing it, especially with the Usui symbols, does help most positive intents. Even the Karuna Reiki, which I'm also a master of. But in that, you start seeing the symbols have much more surgical aspects, where you're starting to do much more minute energy manipulations on people to get them healed. If you can do very minute energy manipulations, you certainly can do things that are not necessarily positive. Not with the symbols that are given, and you have to be more advanced. Now, that fact alone of learning how to tap into other sources is so valuable that I would recommend everyone go get Reiki, because the symbols you get attuned to from the start actually are very positively aligned for health and well-being, and they help a lot.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the possible negative energy aspect of Reiki. In a sense, you were referring to the existence of a negative side, I think. You're only the second person I've talked to who also believes that. The other was a Gnostic priest, and then there was a Golden Dawn magician, a friend of mine. He also thinks that the Reiki energy, in a way, can be used for not so great purposes. So I guess you're the third person in that case, not the second.
Well,
So
the way that actually would work, if when you're just starting out, you're usually attuned to certain symbols. And those symbols are filtering the energy through those symbols. So if we take a non-mystical way to look at this, like it's God coming down and healing people, the symbols act as filters in a kind of information model. So the symbols themselves actually provide the vibration in a sort of way. They change the vibration. Now, if you abstract that away, you realize you could come up with symbols that maybe weren't so beneficial. I don't know why. I mean, I wouldn't personally do that, but it could be done, because if it's a vibration, you're tapping in the universal. Even in the universal, sometimes the most helpful thing is for somebody to die, not to get healed. That is the most beneficial thing. So those currents have to be part of the all that's there.
good point.
Now, I've actually found the best combination is when you start doing Qigong work, heavy Qigong work, and you're a Reiki master. You start really understanding how you're tapping in and pulling the Reiki through various parts of your energy system, because the Qigong tends to be all inside your body. We're figuring out how energy feels when you move it through different parts of your body and understanding that challenge. And a Reiki, then you're able to pull through much more through you, because you can understand how to pull it in your body and out. There's also a million different types of Reiki now. If you look on the internet, you can see this Reiki, this Reiki, this Reiki.
Yes, I saw that, and I always tend to go back to the original sources as much as possible, not to invalidate the later developments in Reiki, but I think there's such a thing as going to the source and working back from there. So the Usui, what I found of the Usui teaching was very interesting and almost primal in a way.
It is, and especially when you realize that even the symbols themselves are a later addition that probably came in America. In Japan, it doesn't seem like Usui taught the symbols, that they were added. I forgot the name of the person who was one of the first Reiki practitioners who started the $10,000 initiations for.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Usui may have added the symbols, but it was much later, after he'd taken many students. And if you actually go back to the people who've done research in Japan to see the Reiki practitioners there, those symbols are later additions to act as sort of guideposts, which is not the way it's usually thought of in the West. We're usually like, okay, we get the symbols and you have that ability. But in there, they're just kind of like guideposts.
That's
Reiki
what I
is
heard.
a system. Yeah, it's a system of mastery, like any other energy system. It's not just a system of you go get attuned and you're done. It's a system of mastery where you're learning in a linear fashion, just like any martial art, just like any other like Qigong work you do, to gradually increase how much you can pull and the nuance of the type of stuff you can do. Like a Reiki master who actually practices a lot, may not as much talk to guides anymore. Like, I don't always have to talk to guides. I know how to kind of fix the problem using the Reiki and the energy when I'm dealing with clients. But if I know how to fix the problem, and I know I can see exactly where to fix the problem, and I can see, bone, this is my personal thing. I can see and feel like where bones are kind of broken or there's chipped or nerves are kind of pinched or stuff like that. And I'm trying to work with the body in the same way, say that quantum touch, which is a different, I think, variation of Reiki, but they don't like to say that. You then are like trying to pull the pinched nerve out. Whereas before, some people, but not everyone, have spirit guides, which could easily be servitors, thought forms in a way, that come through and do the healing for them when they're pulling through the Reiki or help them. But if I have the ability to tell where something is pinched and nerved, and I'm applying the energy in a certain way to get it to go right, I certainly could apply it in the wrong way.
Right, I see.
But that is not the party line of Reiki at all.
No.
But every very experienced Reiki practitioner that I've known, who was also a magician, has said similar things.
I asked you this question initially because in my own practice, I use the Chokurei symbol in the 4 quarters sometimes, and sometimes above and below. And I find it really smooths out the energies of the banishing, the not regular. In a way that I hadn't seen before I got involved with Reiki, and it's a marvelous energy. I know the.
And if you think about it, that is perfectly understandable, because if the symbols themselves are like filters for energy, then using the symbols would filter the energy in an area in a way that was consistent with the symbol themselves.
Right. I never thought about them as filters, so that's a good way to look at them.
And I've done a similar thing where I've used the Reiki symbols